it's an uncomfortable, frankly, ugly place sometimes that some of these people have to go, not just when it feels right. I always say the difference between an amateur and a professional, yes, there's physical skills. Those, again, they balance out. But the professional will do it on the days that they don't feel like it, they don't want to do it. And so if you want to get to that place, you want to get to that number one pick, you have to show up when it's uncomfortable. You have to do it in a way that's not traditional, and you have to do it again and again.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Advocate Podcast. I am your host, Matt Hannaford, and we're a show that is dedicated to helping youth baseball players and parents navigate the often overwhelming world of travel baseball. Now, today's episode is all about the power of mindset, which I have to admit, this is a topic that we oftentimes cover on the Advocate Podcast. And I think there's no better time to talk more about it other than on the heels of the World Series. I just was fortunate enough to go to the World Series. I had 3 players participate in it. Shout out to Anthony Bonda and Ryan Brazier for the series win with the LA Dodgers. But going back to the mindset, the reason why I believe it's important is I would assert that mental strength oftentimes surpasses physical ability by enabling athletes to push through barriers and thrive under pressure. Today, we have an incredibly special guest that is going to help us with this topic. His name is Sean O'Brien of Head Top Performance. Now, Sean isn't just a mental skills coach. He is someone who has lived the highs and lows of baseball himself. Now, like myself, he's been through it as a player, competing at a high level during his collegiate career at Duke University. Now, Sean uses that experience combined with years of mental skills training to empower players to reach their full potential by mastering their mind. And he has learned from one of the best in the field, a legend by the name of Ben Newman. If you have never heard of Ben, he is the renowned mental conditioning coach who's worked previously with the University of Alabama's football team under then legendary Nick Saban. In this episode, Sean and I are going to cover it all. We talk about how players can learn to control what they focus on, honing in on things within their control rather than being distracted by what is not. Sean is going to give us invaluable insights on the connection between commitments and results, and he teaches us how to audit those commitments to see if they're truly aligned with our goals. From managing pressure to taking control of the narrative in our heads, Sean guides us through actionable steps that will help players stay mentally strong in any given situation. He even gives us 3 powerful questions that every player should be asking on a daily basis to check in with their mindset. And it is not just players who are going to benefit from this conversation. Sean offers practical advice for parents as well. If you're a parent and you've ever struggled with the classic car ride home conversation, as you know, when emotions are high and your son might not be ready to hear feedback, Sean's insights will help provide a pathway for you to reach your son in that moment. He does a really good job of sharing ways for parents to better support their athletes without adding unnecessary pressures, which I know is a big challenge today. So get ready for a deep dive into the mind with practical advice that'll resonate both on and off the field. Let's jump into my conversation with Sean O'Brien. All right, so today we are joined by Sean O'Brien. Sean, how are you, man?
Doing great, man. How are you, Matt?
I'm good. Thanks for taking the time and coming on here.
Excited to be here with you, bud. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So why don't we start here? I think let me set the intention for everybody. So the intention that I have and the reason why I wanted to have you on is I think that you carry a lot of insight into what I would consider kind of like the mental skills component of professional athletes, right? And if any of the listeners on here have been listening for a period of time now, they know that obviously from my perspective, I'm trying to provide a ton of value to any family or player who's, let's just say, between the age of 12 to 18 years old. And I think that is kind of your wheelhouse, right? I think you've obviously excelled at even a higher level than that, but I think that you have so much to offer a parent or a player who is between that age group and they are an athlete. So if you could just kind of, tee this off, introduce yourself and like tell everybody who you are.
It's always a fun question. You get to talk about yourself, right? Well, I'll start with this. I started a business, Head Top Performance, with the commitment to creating value and awareness for individuals of how much their mindset influences everything they do in their life. From their profession, which athletics, to career, to academics, to how they show up in other aspects of their life as a friend, a spouse, community leader, to how they show up for themselves, right? How do you talk to yourself each and every single day? Started this journey about 6 years ago. Prior to that, I was in the healthcare space. So I had an executive leadership role within the healthcare industry and really spent a majority of my career doing that. And when you build something, right, in this case, we're building a business, really not from scratch, but from a very small entity to a very significant entity. You bring in a lot of people, different opinions, experiences, ideas, and you have to mold a team. You have to mold a culture, but you also have to mold a mindset, and a mindset of belief in people, belief in one another, how you work together. And that's where I started to see this correlation back to sports and back to creating this idea of how you can influence people's ability to show up a certain way, whether they're performing at their very best over the course of a summer league game, all-star game, or everything in between, or they're having a tremendous amount of struggle and adversity, maybe for the first time in their career. Maybe they're surrounded by a bunch of other alphas and they've never been in that room. That's a very difficult place for a lot of people to adapt to. I have a little bit of athletic background. I played collegiate baseball at Duke University. That was an incredible experience. I came from a very small town in Northern California. So from being the big fish to then going into a room with a bunch of other high-end athletes, that was a very big transition. And that's something I don't lose sight of even today in the work that we get to do with a bunch of professional athletes, a bunch of collegiate athletes, and a bunch of executive leaders at some of the largest organizations in the world. You're performing against the best. And so how do you show up as your best? And that's really the premise of what Head Top Performance is about.
Yeah. And the way that we got introduced was actually through a handful of clients that I represent. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think we were in Denver and you had been in Denver on business or seeing one of these players. And so I think, you and I hit it off. We obviously just went down the rabbit hole of talking about the mental side of the game. But when I met you at the time, you had been doing a lot of work with a name that I think a lot of people may know, which is Ben Newman. Mm-hmm. What's some of the stuff that you found to be the most impactful when you're dealing with athletes?
Yeah. One of the things that, and Ben and I still get to do a lot of work together today, and he's been a mentor. He's been what I call a true fan, just supporting success. And one of the things that I really gravitate towards is this idea of a standard, right? So how you show up in one thing is how you show up in everything. Ben's had the privilege of doing a lot of work with Alabama football before Nick Saban's retirement and got to know Saban really well. And Saban ingratiated that into every player's mindset, like how you do one thing on the field, how you do one thing in the practice field, in the classroom, in the community. And so you have a standard of living, right? And not a financial standard of living, but a standard of living mentally, how you show up to each and every single environment. And, in today's athletic society, we're so focused on just the game itself, right? It's all about the performance. It's about the statistics, about the jersey that I wear, the team that I'm a part of. But in reality, everything you do around that is what contributes to your ability to perform in that setting. And I think that's lost at times. And so that's something that really, Ben's done a phenomenal job highlighting in his work too, that really cascades into the work that we do together, is what's the standard you're choosing to operate by and what goes into that. And we could break that down as we go here, but you have to have a standard, and that standard has to be there in everything that you do, not just the things that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, I would definitely like to break that down, because I think as I think about the mental side of the game, right? I think it's so easy to get caught up, like just staying on the surface. Mm-hmm. Okay, I know I need to think empowering thoughts. I need to, think positively about certain things. And, just to kind of dive into specific situations. So let's just say someone listening here is either a player who has experienced going to a showcase or a tournament and has put a ton of pressure on himself and has played in that tournament and just utterly failed, right? Maybe he went into it thinking he needed to be perfect, but for whatever reason, he did not perform at the level that he knows he's capable of. And I would say a lot of that probably would stem from maybe having a certain mindset going in where, I need to convince everybody watching that I'm one of the best, right? So every single at bat, they've got to go 4 for 4 in every at bat. They've got to hit 4 home runs in every at bat. They've got to, if they're a pitcher, they've got to strike everybody out. And I just think it's so unreasonable, right? But I want to give these players or families kind of some tools here. So how can we dive deep into like some of this work? How can we do that?
Love it. So let's go through, walk you through an exercise we'd walk through with one of our pro guys, collegiate guys, or one of our high-end amateur guys that are on this journey. And we'll use your example as sort of a backdrop to that. say I'm going into this showcase environment. And typically a showcase by definition is to show talent, right? To show skills against other individuals. It's non-traditional in the sense of, yes, there's innings and there's outs and there's strikes, it's still bases, but the environment has a much different aura to it. You're not competing with the team per se, you're competing against yourself in a lot of cases. And a lot of that competition against yourself is how you're looking at it. And so the first thing I would say is, what are you choosing to focus on? And so that theme was all the things you're mentioning in that example are uncontrolled. I can't control whether or not I could hit 4 of the best contact balls I've ever hit in my life, but they may be directly at someone. And so statistically, I'm 0 for 4, but in reality, I had 4 of the best at-bats I've had all summer, right? But if I walk away from that event and I choose to focus on the things I cannot control, that's going to be an impact on everything I do going forward. And so one of the first things we do is, what are you committed to doing preparing for this event? And we say confidence comes through the commitments that you keep to yourself each and every single day. Yeah. So if I want to have confidence in whatever I'm doing in life, I need to make sure that I keep my commitments first and foremost. And so you think about, like, I'm traditionalist. I have the yellow notepad and I check things off as I go through my day. If I can look at that at the end of the day and say that I did those things, I'm going to have confidence in a higher form than I would versus the alternative. So if I'm an athlete and I'm going into a showcase environment and I'm preparing, what are the commitments that I've made to myself leading up to that event, days, weeks, or months, and how have I executed on those? Because if I say I'm going to get this much time in the cage, or this much time in training room, this much time in recovery, eating a certain way, if I'm doing all those things, which I have complete control over, I promise you are going to show up more confident into that environment. And when you can do that consistently, the byproduct of confidence then becomes conviction. And I believe the biggest differentiator between, a good performance and sustained performance is those that have conviction in what you're doing. But you can't have conviction if you don't have confidence. So the first thing, where is your confidence coming from? And am I keeping the commitments that I've laid out to myself? And so we'll walk an athlete through that. We'll literally do an audit of their commitments. And we'll get pretty nuanced and granular in how they go about that. We'll prompt them, like daily prompts through questions or text. We'll do end of the week or end of the month assessments to how you're keeping those commitments. I'm not here to define what your commitments are. Yes, we give you guidance on that, but we're going to give you direction to go, but you're going to make those commitments for yourself. And when you can do that and you start to honor those commitments, I always say it turns up the internal voice, that voice of belief and confidence, and it turns down some of the external noise and pressure that we put on ourselves. Pressure is all byproduct of external factors. It's not internal. And so our ability to control that is as big a driver to success as anything I've seen.
Well, I think with players, players may make let's just say there's a kid who's 16 years old, he's going to a showcase and he's putting in the work. Maybe he's not thinking about it on a daily basis in the same way that you're describing, right? So he is doing the same things, not seeing them as commitments. He sees them as like just his daily activity, right? He works out every day. He takes ground balls every day. He hits every day. So he's doing all this stuff. He then in 3 weeks goes to an event and then feels this stress and this pressure. And what I'm hearing you say, which I find extremely valuable, it's like, what would help is if he identifies and actually communicates with someone else, look, I am making this commitment, because I think it's in the act of doing that that then reinforces before the showcase. It's almost a reminder. I have done the things that I've needed to do to become prepared.
Couldn't agree more. It's interesting. I'll draw a correlation. People talk about public speaking as maybe one of the most fearful things in the world to do. And I do a fair amount of public speaking. And I still get what I'll call anxious, right? Nervous and anxious are two different things in my opinion. But the anxiousness comes from excitement, energy. You've done the preparation, right? You've prepared. But it's also understanding that, you're there to add value, right? In whatever setting you're in. As an individual athlete, say in a game of baseball, yes, you're part of a team, but you have an individual moment to perform. Whether that's when that ball's hit at you and you have to field it and get it to the location, whether it's you're in the batter's box, whether you're on the mound competing. But if I realize that I've done everything I can within this moment to prepare, you take so much of that pressure off of yourself and you increase the focus into what it is that you're doing and executing on. Now, we could take it even more granular, and I'm happy to do that. It's like, I'm not just, okay, Sean, I'm doing the work. I'm preparing. I'm working hard. I'm putting in the effort, but it's still not working. Then what? Right? And then the second tier really gets into, okay, how am I choosing to frame the environment and the situation? Because baseball is a game that's littered with failure, right? The best of the best are going to fail 7.5 times, if not more. And so out of 10, so what am I doing to reframe the events? That becomes the second part of the equation.
So let's play this out if you would. So let's say I'm the player, right? So I've gone through a showcase. I prepared, I made commitments. I kept track of those commitments. We discussed it. We talked through it. I go to the showcase and, the moment just got the best of me. I wasn't myself. First ground ball hit to me, I airmailed it a little bit. Guy was safe. And so from that point forward, it was like a spiral, like, oh no, now I can't make a mistake. So we're now over the showcase. We're past the showcase. And now we're having another conversation. If I'm the player, what are some of the questions that you're asking me? And I would love to kind of volley back and forth and just show people who are listening, how this actually would be beneficial.
Yeah. The first thing I'm going to ask you after any event, whether it's a game, some of the guys we work with, we talk to after every game, right? We do a post-game assessment, reflection. It could be 5 minutes. Sometimes it could be 30 minutes or an hour. But first thing I'm going to ask you, it's what do you take from that experience that you want to carry forward with you? So the way that I package it is what's working well or what went well that I want to make sure I carry forward with me to the next game. Now, oftentimes, go ahead.
I was going to say in this instance, let's just say I said, okay, well, I had a routine before my at-bats, right? I have a breathing routine. I felt like I was walking to the plate in a confident manner. I gave myself what I found to be, or what I thought would have been the best opportunity for success. It just wasn't there. So for me, a takeaway would be I stuck with my routine.
Perfect. Okay. And then what did not go well that you need to let go of and you don't want to carry with you to the next game, next showcase, next event? What do you need to let go of that you're holding on to right now from that game?
I would say the thoughts that just would creep in out of fear, right? It's almost, a good buddy of mine calls it a non-vision, right? Don't strike out. Don't make an error, right? These things that are negatives that you repeat over and over to yourself. That's something that I think a lot of players fall victim to when they're in those moments. Oftentimes, I've listened to players say this, and the first things they say is I just couldn't get it out of my head. I was afraid. I was fearful. I didn't have confidence. It's that way of what I would call way of being that I think doesn't work.
So in those two examples, what I take from that is you have a routine that serves you, right? You have a process that serves you. What I would like you to consider adding to that process is a 5 to 10 second interval of some of your best moments when you felt the most confident, when you're not thinking. Athletes often refer to it as their zone, right? When you're just flowing, you're not thinking, you're just doing. You've done all the work, right? Trust your hands, trust your eyes, trust your preparation. So in this case, what is it when you felt at your very best that you can put into that pregame routine to draw yourself to what I call strengths of performance? So I want my mind focused on what I do best. And so if I'm a guy that bats for average, if I'm a contact guy, if I'm a power guy, if I'm a pitcher that, I'm a velocity guy, I'm going to go to where I'm the strongest, no matter what the circumstance. And I'm going to put my energy and effort into that right before the performance. So draw attention to the strength before the performance, because my mind will gravitate towards the most recent event. And if I go up there thinking cannot fail, cannot let this happen, cannot lose advantage of this opportunity, that's what's going to happen. Versus the alternative, if I'm here for a reason and I do this really well, and I'm going to get closer to that as a result.
How do you help players do that? So is this 3 to 5? I don't remember the number of things you said, but let's just say it was 3 to 5 instances where you had success, right? Maybe you hit a homer, you had a really good at bat, and you're visualizing in that moment the feeling you had when you did that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Prior success. Draw a connection to prior success to repeat that event.
Got it. And so is this something that players use walking up to home plate? Is this something they do before a game? Is it both?
Yeah, I've seen both. I think, first and foremost, I think one thing we want to get to is a place where the athlete's not thinking. Right? That to me is the greatest place to be, is where you're not thinking. Now, reality is we all think far too much. I think I've shared with you, we on average think we have 75,000 thoughts in a given day, and 80% of those are negatively oriented. That's terrifying. 60,000 thoughts in my day are going to have a negative orientation. But the scarier part, and where this correlates to athletics, is that 90% of those are going to carry over day after day. And so in a game of baseball where you're playing at the frequency that you're playing, or you're having several at-bats in a given game, or you're playing 9 innings and you're going to get the ball hit to you a certain frequency, I'm naturally going to a place of fear, doubt, uncertainty if I've had an event that doesn't add strength. And
Right.
so we want to interject that wiring. So first step is I don't want you thinking. Well, how do I not let you think? Is I let you focus on all the things you control, all your preparation, your process and routine. Like you mentioned, Matt, before I go to the plate, here's what I do. So it turns down the external noise. But then when I'm in the event, I want to reframe maybe negative thoughts or I cannot fail, cannot strike out to, hey, I get to be in this situation. I get to be on with 2 outs, runners on second and third, and we need these both in to get back ahead. I get to be in that. So language becomes a really critical part. How am I talking to myself about this situation? But the preparation, it could be really ideally before a game. We go through the process. We have them read a script that they've written. It's a short script, right? It takes 20, 30 seconds ideally. But the script of what I do well, why I do it, and how I'm going to do it today. So what I do well, why I do it, and how I'm going to do it today. Even those 3 questions, if you can have your athlete and deploy that on a day-to-day basis or game to game, you start to gravitate towards areas of strength of performance versus alternative thoughts that can be detrimental to your performance.
I love that. Repeat that one more time.
Yeah. So what am I doing? How am I doing it? And why am I doing it? In any particular order, by the way.
Right.
But it helps me focus on what the opportunity is, how I'm going to do it. I'm going to get to visualize that. And why I'm doing it. Like, what's the reason I'm doing this? I love the game. I'm doing it to honor my family. I'm doing it to prove to myself I can do something I didn't think I could. But give yourself that awareness and you take control of the narrative, or the narrative will take control of you in those situations.
Yeah, I think what I love so much about this is everybody knows, and we've talked about it on this podcast even, everybody knows that a large percentage of baseball, and really every professional sport, is mental, right? Mm-hmm. And people know that they need tools to implement this mental side of the game. And in my experience, despite the fact that they know this, the more success you have at these younger ages, the less likely it is that you're going to employ these strategies early. And what I've oftentimes reminded the guys that we represent, even through the draft, is, look, these are the things that the guys at the next level undoubtedly have to do for success. So let's implement it in your game now and start building that tool now, right? But one of the things that I've struggled with a lot of these players is getting them to see the positive side of it. And oftentimes it's only when they fail that they realize it's necessary, because whatever that pain was in that failure, they never want to feel it again. And so it's like, okay, then what do I need to do to never feel this again? And I think with that mindset, there's also a negative side to it, which is, well, now it's transactional, which is, okay, then you're telling me if I do this, then I'm going to get that. Okay, I'll do it then. And they'll do it as long as it works. But the minute they do it and it doesn't work, okay, that didn't work. I need something new. And then they go latch on to something else. And so a little story I'll tell you is I was, Cam Smith is the golfer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Cam Smith, golfer, been playing a long time. Obviously he's over on Live right now. And he was talking about his putting routine. And somebody asked him, like, how long have you had this putting routine? And he said, oh, shoot, as long as I can remember, at least 15 years. 15 years, same putting routine, right? And imagine how many bad putts he's made. But despite the fact that he's made bad putts, he's stuck with the same routine. And it's for the reasons that you've given, I'm sure, which is, no, it's not the act of doing it that's valuable. Right? It's ultimately what your brain will take away and the place it will put yourself when you're able to stick to this routine that sounds like is the most valuable.
So true, man. I love the way you phrase that. Like, think about it, different analogies. If I want to go run a marathon at some point in time, right? I'm not just going to sign up for that marathon and be able to go run 26. Maybe some people can give you credit if that's the case. But you're building a muscle. You're building endurance in that case, right? You're building mileage. Or what's the idea of stretching? Why do you stretch, right? Well, it's not necessarily because you have a pulled muscle. It's to prevent the pulled muscle. So I need to build muscles internally in my mind and in my body before they're needed, right? I'm building strength. I'm building capacity. And then I'm building discipline as a byproduct of those things. So strength and capacity equal discipline. And when you have discipline, then it becomes ingrained in who you are. Right? Whether it's people that, like, I get out every day and I take a certain number of swings, or I get out every day and I lift, or you start to eat a certain way. A lot of professional athletes, right? They've gotten away with eating a certain way because you're young and your body allows you to do that. And you don't feel the wear and tear of playing 162 games. But then all of a sudden, as you start to get into that, you realize I need to find differentiators. I need to find differentiators in my mental makeup, my physical makeup, my preparation. And if you wait till an event, you're going to be so far behind those that are already preparing. The Cam Smith example is a great one. 15 years, right? Miss or make the putt. He's got a process. So you think about playing the game, youth baseball at a high level in a competitive environment, and you're a teenager. How can you start to differentiate yourself? Because your physical tools will ultimately average out. Whether you're a guy that lights up the radar gun at triple digits or whether you're a guy that hits for power like no one else has seen at your level, we all know it's going to level out at some point. So what are you doing now to be proactive and get ahead of it, even when no one's telling you need to? When people are telling you how great you are, how can you stay ahead of that curve and find an edge in the details?
How was goal setting part of your practice with guys?
It's shifted a little bit, to be honest with you. I'm a very goal-oriented guy. I'm sitting here in my office. I'm looking, I got the whiteboard, and you're thinking about goals and objectives. Very traditional in that regard, but it's evolved. And what I mean by that is goals ultimately they're finite, right? So goal is typically time-bound or event-bound. So let's use, again, athletics. Let's use the showcase example. Hey, my goal is to get invited to the showcase. Great. You made it to the showcase. My goal is to perform at the highest level at the showcase. Well, what does that mean for you? That means to bat at this average or to have this amount of strikeout, whatever the variable is. And those are wonderful, what I'll call targets to have. But goals to me should be infinite. And what I mean by that is they don't turn on and off, right? Yes, there's seasons. Yes, there's showcases. Yes, there's events. But if I'm really setting the best goal, like I'm focused on how I get better every day. That's a goal, right? And so if I could, again, rather than external, I'm aware. I always like to say external awareness, but internal commitment to the goal that is me. So I'm externally aware of what I need to do to perform, to get the scholarship, to get the signing bonus, to get called up. I'm externally aware of those things, but I'm internally committed to being the best version of me. And that's an infinite race. It does not turn on and off. I like to say, yes, there's rest stops in rest areas to take a break, but you don't turn it off. You get back on and you continually look for ways to get better. So what are the mile markers rather than goals is the way we like to phrase it. So my mile markers on my infinite race, rather than just goals, is to, hey, get invited to this showcase. That's the next mile marker. Then the mile marker after that is to perform at a high level at that showcase. And then after that, the next mile marker is to, get X number of scholarship opportunities. So you start to work your way down that path, but we have to realize we don't start and stop by those things because a lot of guys get what we call seduced by success. Right? Hey, I had a great showcase. Now what? Hey, I got drafted. Now what? And you've seen that in your line of work. Guys that get drafted and called at the arrival point versus guys that are looking to get better each and every single day and called at the arrival.
So I want to do this with you with these goals because I think this is one of the most valuable things we could probably talk about. I think everybody, again, and I love that you said, it's actually changed for me a little bit because everybody just when you talk about goals says, okay, I know I need goals, right? I recognize that I need those things. But if you're like me, everybody's set goals and there have been some of the goals that you've set that you haven't hit. And then that causes frustration, disappointment, and that's ultimately led to a certain behavior, right? And so I know goal setting is valuable on some level. And what I'm hearing you say is there's a certain way to actually set the goals that is or can be the most valuable. So if you were working with a player, how are you doing that? Like, what is the conversation and how are you saying, okay, let's talk about your goals over the next 5 years?
Mm-hmm. So I'll say, I'll call it reverse engineering. So take me to the place, Matt, you want to go. Like, where do you want to be? What are you sitting at and doing in 10 years from now? Hey, I'm playing for, go ahead.
I'll tell you. So I want to be the number one overall pick in the draft.
Okay. You want to be the number one overall pick, and how much time do we have to do that? How long until you're draft?
I'm draft eligible in 4 years.
4 years. So we have 4 years. We have 48 months to be able to accomplish this goal. And I don't care what point of this you enter at, whether you're the number one prospect in your class, whether you're a mid-level guy, or maybe you're not even on the radar yet. I could care less about that part. What I care about is you've just identified a marker on this journey. And so we start to describe what that looks like to be the number one pick in the draft. Right? What are the characteristics of the number one pick in the draft? What are you doing and how are you doing it? And then we start to reverse engineer the mile markers on the infinite race, right? So let's take that thing all the way back to the start because we got 48 months and that may seem like a long time, but as any Olympian will tell you, especially as we're in Olympic season, that goes by real quick. And so I'm going to take it down all the way to that granular level of month 1 of 48, what we need to start doing differently to move towards that destination. And the mentality is that each day is going to demonstrate a level of progress. So one of the things, it's like, hey, Sean, I'm out there and I'm getting 100 ground balls in a day and I'm taking 100 swings in the cage and I'm doing well. It's like, that's great. But Matt, I know you can do better. And so maybe you're going to take 70 swings, but they're going to be the best, most exhausting mentally and physically swings that you've ever taken in your life. And I want you to focus on that. Or maybe you're going to take 30 every day, but they're going to differentiate your approach. Same thing with the ground balls. Same thing with the lifting. So we're going to walk you all the way back. The other thing is we're going to identify, so you have physical characteristics. You have what we'll call environment characteristics, like what teams you're a part of, who you're playing with, how is that uncomfortable for you, taking you out of your comfort zone. If you're maybe a shortstop traditionally, we're going to see what else you can do to demonstrate your capability. And then mentally, what are you going to do to grow and develop yourself? So it's really holistic, right? It's not just one dimensional. We're not here just talking about your psyche. Again, we're not stepping outside of our zone of expertise and trying to be a trainer or a coach, but we're definitely trying to emphasize the other areas. So that would be the start of that journey. And I'm not describing those characteristics. You're describing those characteristics. And my commitment is to challenge you in those definitions. So, hey, Sean, I need to be 6'4", 235, throwing 100 miles an hour to be able to be that guy. Okay, well, you're not 6'4", and you're not going to be 235, but you're 5'11", and you're 185. So what does that mean to be the number 1 pick? We got 4 years to figure this thing out. So it really challenges people, and frankly, in an uncomfortable way. You think in ways that you traditionally wouldn't. You focus on things that you traditionally wouldn't, but it allows you to expand your viewpoint, which expands your capability of who you are, which increases your confidence, and most importantly of all, your commitment to go get it.
Yeah, and the reason why I love this is, what we're ultimately talking about is players reaching their highest level of potential, right? And the reality of this is, maybe I won't be the number 1 overall pick in the draft, but I can assure you, if I can commit to doing this stuff, I will be a much better version of this guy than the guy that I was ultimately going to be without thinking that way, right? But it is, I have these conversations with my clients as well. And I ask them after they, give me these really grand visions that they want to have in their career. And I ask them, I said, do you know who you need to become in order to do all that stuff? And are you committed to doing that? Because it's very easy to sit here and say, yes, I want to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Do you actually know what that means? And are you committed to it? Because the majority of players, they want that. They're not committed to it.
So true. You think about the very best in anything they've ever done. I just finished the book Relentless by Tim Grover for like the 4th time.
Great book.
Love the book. But I love how he worked with Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade. And I love how he highlights like these guys are just wired differently. Physically, they may have been the most gifted of all time, right? Or close to it. But their commitment was the greatest gift they've ever had. And we've all learned more about Kobe since his tragic passing. And we've heard about some of the 3 workouts a day and his level of commitment to detail. Jordan was similarly wired. It takes that. It's an uncomfortable, frankly, ugly place sometimes that some of these people have to go, not just when it feels right. I always say the difference between an amateur and a professional, yes, there's physical skills. Those, again, they balance out. But the professional will do it on the days that they don't feel like it. They don't want to do it, right? Jordan, when he had the food poisoning in that Utah final, was like, these guys show up. And so if you want to get to that place, you want to get to that number 1 pick, you have to show up when it's uncomfortable. You have to do it in a way that's not traditional, and you have to do it again and again. And if you're willing to do that, you will move much closer to that number 1 pick in the draft. And you'll find the best darn version of yourself there, not just as an athlete, but as a person. And that'll cascade into every part of your life, no matter what you get to do next. And if I'm a parent and I'm trying to, build a child and a son to be the best version of themselves, I want them to push to that place and see what they're capable of.
So funny story about the Relentless book. So I'd reached out to Tim. This is 2017, 18 maybe. Mm-hmm. I ended up buying the book for Josh Donaldson. Josh Donaldson's on the Toronto Blue Jays at the time. I bought him the book and he calls me on the phone. He says, Matt, I love this book. I want to get every single player in the organization one of these books. So I ended up talking to Tim Grover's partner and they sent out a book for literally every single person in the organization. I mean, that book is so special. It really is. If anybody hasn't read it, like go pick it up. There is no doubt you will put that book down and feel like you are superhuman and you can do some damage.
It's going to push you in a way that you're not used to. That's for sure.
Yeah. And then, you mentioned this is a hard process. Like, I don't know if you heard Tom Brady recently talking about just, kids in high school and sports, like, guess what? Life is hard. Like, you're not going to be great if you can't deal with, when your buddies are out going, hanging out, and you have to be at the gym, or your buddies are out going out at night and you have to get some sleep because you got a game tomorrow. Like, it's not easy to do, and that's something that I think a lot of players, they want both. And, oh no, I can go out with my buddies and I can go perform at the highest level. And the reality of this is you might be able to get away with it for a period of time, but you will not succeed in the level that you want to succeed if that's your way of being.
It's like the famous element, right? The publicity, the recognition, all of those things that I think a lot of individuals, we naturally gravitate towards, right? We all want, who doesn't want that in so many cases? But what goes into that and how you respond to it, I think are the two most important things to focus on. Like, I'm going to get there, but what am I going to do when I get there? And then more importantly, how am I going to get there and stay there? I think Brady also said in his retirement speech for the Patriots, you don't have to be the most talented or gifted, but you have to be the most committed to doing the right things each and every single day, those decisions that you're making each and every single day. And there's a lot of temptation. There's a lot of external pressure, peer pressure. You're a teenage kid. There's a lot of other things you want to be doing, other demands. And you can do all those things, right? But it comes with a choice. And do you want to do that? Or do you want to commit to being that number one pick in the draft? And that's a choice you get to make. And that's your choice.
Right. I'm curious if you have any advice for parents. One of the questions I oftentimes think about is like, how can I empower parents to help their sons ultimately reach a higher potential, right? Now, what comes to mind for me is just on the surface is thinking like, obviously encourage them to think bigger than themselves, right? That's kind of a little bit about what we're talking about. But I think there's a whole different level that maybe I'm not aware of. What would you say to that question?
We say this to our corporate clients, and people often ask us when they engage, like, hey, how do you define progress? Like, how do we know this is working? Like, how do we know that we're getting better or improving? Our business is getting better, our athletes getting better? I would say there's got to be a form of engagement. I'm going to take it as far as you want to take it, right? And so as a parent, yes, you have to push, right? The kid's not naturally just going to start to get to that place, right? You have to initiate. You have to be the facilitator of that process. But you also want to see where their energy goes. Right? So many people talk about where's your passion at, right? Well, my passion is to be the number one pick, but where's their energy? So if I'm a parent, where's their energy being spent, right? Or are they waking up early and they're going in the garage and taking swings? Okay, that's a kid that has energy that aligns with their passion to be the number one pick. Or is my child just loving the social dynamic or the recognition dynamic? And again, there's nothing wrong with those things, but where's the energy going? So as a parent, can I help them put their energy in the right place? And then when I find that, say it's in the preparation, say it's in the hard work, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just in the game. They don't want to do the work, but they're getting by right now because they're so darn talented. But eventually we know that'll catch up to them. How do I celebrate their greatest talent to create more of it? So I think find the energy source would be the first place I try to identify with parents. Like, where is their energy source? What are they enjoying doing? Not what they're passionate about, not what they're talking about. Where is their time being spent?
I'm sure, you've worked with a lot of athletes. I'm sure on some level there's been an athlete or two where it's like they're hard-headed maybe, right? They're just not accepting that. And you see it. You see, oh man, if you could just buy into this, like this is where it's at, right? Can you talk about that circumstance? And I don't mean get specific as far as who it is. I just mean just conceptually, like instances like that and like what the takeaway is for you with these situations.
Yeah, I think about even like the parent in this case, right? You're trying to, you could sort of see the road ahead and you're trying to tell them to take the detour before sitting in traffic, right? Or getting stuck in a certain position, and they're just not willing to understand or buy in. Some of the clients we work with, especially guys that have arrived, right? Maybe they're even on their second big league contract, right? So they don't have to worry about anything. Maybe they've made a couple all-star games, but how can I help them identify how you keep making all-star games, right? How you continue to show up. And so one of the things that I found that's really powerful is the voice of a peer, right? So whether it's a teammate, whether it's another member. So we've become a lot more intentional about bringing in external voices to the conversation, right? Bringing in a peer that's maybe even a competitor in some form and helping them cross-pollinate what we call best practices. So one option there is this external voice. Who can I bring in that they're more inclined to listen to or relate to? And then specifically to our work, if they're not willing to take the action, right? There's only a certain place that we can go to. We could keep pushing that, or I can help them better understand what it is that they told us they wanted, what they were going for. Like, Matt, you defined this. I didn't define this. This was your definition. And here's all the reasons why you defined this for me. Yeah, maybe the situation's changed, but this is still your definition. So my commitment and responsibility is to help them draw back to, you define this as your success. These are the steps that we reverse engineered to get there. You mentioned earlier athletes that, arrived to a certain point and never really had to go through adversity or struggle. They just always performed, and then they hit it, right? It's not an if, it's a when. They're all going to hit it. And so those athletes in particular that we work with, we try to, I would almost say, scare it out of them initially. Like, hey, this is going to come, right? But I'm going to make you so strong mentally and from a preparation perspective that when it does, you're almost ready for it. You're excited by it versus demoralized by it. So those are a few things: is proactively drawing attention to what's ahead of you, bringing in external voices to help create some cross-pollination of best practices, and then drawing that attention to what their definition is. So it's not my idea. It's your idea, Matt. I'm just here to help facilitate it.
Right. Are you familiar with the book, The 3 Laws of Performance?
I've not read it. No.
It's a great book. And I mentioned it briefly because it reminds me a little bit about what you said. It reminds me of the first law, which is people perform based on how the world occurs to them. Right. And what I've found, if a player's ever really hung up on, let's call it the external. So for example, let's just say a player's not performing, and because he's not performing, the team's not playing him. Let's just say I'm talking about a minor leaguer or a major leaguer, somebody in professional baseball. And it's so easy for that player to speak as though what he's seeing is fact, right? The team's screwing me. I've got no future here, right? Now that may be true, but where I oftentimes want to invite players into thinking about it is like, that also acknowledging that, how is that changing the situation, right? You see this thing happening, and it's not that you've played any role in that. It's not that maybe that isn't true. Maybe you have a bright future with the team, but the team ultimately is doing what they're doing for other reasons. They buy into this idea and this belief that like, no, I have no future here. I need to get traded. I need to get, released, DFA me, whatever it is. And there are instances and occurrences where, yes, that needs to happen. But I've found the majority of the time it doesn't need to happen. And the player's mindset is just looking at the external saying, this is fact, this is true, and living from that place. And so you can't separate it now, right? You can't get them to see it any other way because they don't want to. You're almost challenging their belief in life, right?
It rattles the cage a little bit when you have that conversation. And I think it's a really powerful point of opportunity as a parent, as an athlete, to think about when you face adversity in a situation. And if you put the situation as the single point of your adversity, it's gonna follow you wherever you go. Say you're in a relationship with someone and hey, it's their fault. When you go to the next relationship, it's going to be their fault again. Say you're at a job, it's the job's fault, it's the company's fault. It's going to be the next company's fault as well. It's going to be the next job's fault as well. It's the team, it's the organization, it's the environment, or is it me? And as you started, it may not be you at all. But if you choose to let it be everything else but you, it ultimately will become you. And so you have to start by taking ownership. You have to start by saying, if I'm doing everything in my power, and then I am reframing the situation, right? And you have to reframe and say, what am I taking from this? I'm still part of a team that has X, Y, and Z resources, or they have X opportunities. I have to choose to reframe that, because if I don't, I'll constantly put everything else on others, and that'll follow me no matter what it is in my life or whatever environment I apply it to. Now, if you can realize that sometimes that's going to happen, but I choose to look at it myself, you're going to be a stronger version of yourself for whatever situation you get into.
Exactly. Like there's power, right? There's power in looking at it that way. If I accept responsibility, and like there is power in me being able to accept that and move forward, knowing, yeah, look, I haven't been perfect. Have I played a role in this? Yes. Has the team played a role in it? Yeah, potentially. But I can't control their behavior. I can only control mine.
Think about it. There's a lot of preferential treatment that occurs in athletics, right? You're a certain high draft pick. You're a 5-star guy. You come from great pedigree. You're part of a great program. It's not going to be all logical, right? And that's tough when you reach that inflection point in sports where you realize it's a business and there is favoritism even in youth sports, right? And if you start to put all your energy into that, what's not happening or why me, that's where your mind and energy will go. And I mentioned this earlier, your energy needs to go into everything that you get to control and all the effort you get to put in. And we tell our athletes this, if you put enough noise out there through your work and through your effort, the opportunity will balance out, right? The favoritism and the sort of law of averages will come your direction as a result of the work. And let that be your driver of activity versus the external factor.
I would like to help out some of these younger players. Let's call them 12, 13 years old, right? A player who's, at that age, they've got dreams and ambitions and whatever, but they're, they have a lot to learn. And my assumption is that a player at that age, their mindset is just starting to be crystallized and formed, especially on the baseball field. So what are some exercises, some things that you would have or you could recommend for someone of that age? Let's call it 12 to 14, that they can at least just start employing to help with some of this stuff, with just introducing them to it.
It's a fun age, and there's a lot going on at that age of life, and just a lot of things you're excited about, interested in, want to be a part of. And so I always say, let's bring joy and excitement to what it is that you're doing. And so I think people call it journaling. I call it just reflection or sort of check-in. And if you're asking yourself after every game, or if you go through a certain series of practices, like, what was the thing I was most proud of that I did this week? What was the thing that I was most nervous on, but I still did it and performed? What was something I proved to myself that I didn't think I could do that I did? Or what was something that didn't go well or I was angry by? And how can I respond to that moving forward? I would say, let's bring awareness into our environment through prompts, also known as questions, to draw my mindset in a direction that serves me, right? And especially at that age, like, you're not asked those questions. And typically you get in the car after a game as a 12 or 13-year-old and mom or dad are like, you were so great, Matt. You did everything so well, right? Maybe there's a false sense of reality. Or it goes the other direction. Like, gosh, what happened to you out there? You were lost. Like, did you even want to play? Like, what in the heck's going on? And each game is dictated by my performance versus how can I be consistent, both as a 12 or 13-year-old athlete and or as a parent to that 12 or 13-year-old athlete, and draw attention to the same consistent things where I know growth is going to occur. What did you do well that you want to do again? What did not go well that we can do less of or let go of? And what brought you joy and energy into your week? And how can I help support you in creating more of that? If I could just triangulate around those three things, I start to build the muscle of mental conditioning and performance for my child and for the individual athlete at an early age. And guess what? It's going to help them in the classroom. It's going to help them as, in the household. It's going to help them in other areas of their life as well.
That's great. I'm curious, what haven't we talked about that you think you would find valuable?
One thing that comes to mind is people talk a lot about being motivated, right? Like, I'm motivated to be the number one pick. I'm motivated to get that scholarship. I'm motivated to perform in that showcase, right? And again, I'm going to highlight this theme of external factors. Motivation is very externally driven. I want the contract. I want to be on the team. I want to play for that school. Those are all wonderful things. We need to have them. And I don't want my comments earlier around goal. I think goals are fantastic, but you have to look at them in an infinite way. They're not start and stop features. They're continual, right? I keep stacking to them. One of my favorite questions is, now what? You've arrived. You made the team. You hit for average. Now what? Right? We can always seek out growth. So I would highlight, like, motivation comes from external factors, right? Like recognition, acknowledgement, and those are really nice things, but they're not always going to be there. What is always going to be there is commitment. What am I choosing to commit to? And if I'm choosing to commit to getting a little bit better each and every single day, that's going to serve me a lot more than just being motivated by external things. Now, some people can think about motivation. I want to honor my family. I want to create a legacy. Yeah, those are definitely motivating, but I would say those are commitments to doing something, and that's going to serve you even more so. So let's not be just motivated by external features or factors or recognition. Let's be really committed internally to the things that we know that are going to make us better every day. It's going to take us a lot further as we do.
I love that. Yeah, I think people's view of motivation, I actually don't know how much people think about. They know they're motivated, but I don't think they ever really take the time to understand what that word really means. And it oftentimes can, get them down a different pathway that isn't empowering. I think I can force my way into something, and I'm going to, especially nowadays, I feel like a lot of people think that that's what they need to do. It's competitive, so let me just muscle my way through.
It's someone else's definition typically, right? The motivation is someone else's motivation, maybe not fully your own. And if I don't fully own and commit to my own, I'm not going to go all the way through it. I'm not going to commit to it in the same way.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Sean, brother, this was fantastic. You gave me a lot of things to think about. You know, I certainly know that people who are listening have much more tools than they had when they came on. Tell everybody how they can find you.
Yeah, well, appreciate the comments first and foremost. I love, who this is targeted for and the impact that you're getting to create on this audience, right? And those individuals, like that youth sport stage, that sport competitive environment, it's going to serve you in so many ways in life. And I love that you're getting to serve them with some of these tools. So I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, headtopperformance.com is where you can find us. Feel free to schedule some time. We do sort of inquiry and discovery calls with individuals like, hey, tell me what this is. Does this apply to this situation? Feel free to help you through that journey if that's of interest to you. But love the conversation today as well, and just the opportunity for utilization. We have to find something that can be applied. This isn't just like theory and concept. This is application and behaviors that we're trying to establish. And hopefully everyone's taken one of those that they can utilize going forward.
Well, and again, the reason why I wanted to have you on, man, is I feel like, and I've known you for a while now, but I feel like we both share a real heart for wanting to add value to athletes' lives. And so, for anybody who has a son, somebody that they know that could benefit from working with Sean, by all means, reach out to him. I will vouch for him. He is what he sounds like. He's very knowledgeable and skilled in this world. So, Sean, thank you. Can't thank you enough, man. This has been fun, and would love to have you on again sometime soon.
Let's run it back. Appreciate you, Matt.